Hello, my dears. Today's the day I've been looking forward to. I get to know Jo Saxton, who is someone I have long admired, and she is already prompt as can be right here. And I bet a pro in getting on Instagram Live, which you're just going to watch me forever openly struggle with. Jill will be right here, and I'm very excited. Also, by the power, she will appear. It always feels like a miracle, Joe.
You just never know.
It doesn't feel right. It's like a trust fall back into an Instagram hand. That's the true invisible hand is apparently technology.
Absolutely. Carrying us, technology.
/ Holy Spirit. Joe, I've really been wanting to get to know you for such a long time because I watch you online and you bring kindness and tea, and you make me want to feel brave in the world. And
thank you.
I'm really grateful you said yes to doing this.
Thank you so much. Also, I must first of all say, I like this lipstick.
It's part of I buy 8 of the same very cheap brand, and I just sit there and see what happens. And this was today.
Mm-hmm. It did for sure. It did for sure.
Thank you. It's part of my, don't look at my hair, look at my mouth. It's an optical illusion. And now is also the time where I'm like desperate to tell you all the things we have in common. Like,
yes.
Hey, I was born in London. Were you also born in London or raised there, hypothetically?
Whereabouts were you born in London?
My mom walked herself from King's College, where she was a student, to Middlesex Hospital, which is now no longer a hospital. And then there was. My parents were both very like farmer kid Canadian students who got scholarships to the University of London. So yeah, I was born in student housing.
Well, maybe that was kind of giving a hint to the academic you would become. Maybe you just needed to be born in that kind of area. Just to ground
to absorb it. I do sort of have like a sixth sense for like, is there a wine and cheese function going on somewhere? Is someone wearing sort of muted velvet kind of, and then like has a wingback chair? And I'm just get on in there. And you've got Nigerian parents, and you are just a beautiful cosmopolitan who now lives in Minneapolis.
Well, thank you. That's a very nice way of putting it. But yes, I've been around. I've been around. But yes, I'm born and raised in London. And then my parents moved to London in the 60s when it was particularly unfriendly. And my mum is still there, actually. And I've lived in the States now. I've lived in the US for about 17 years. 17 years.
Yeah, me too-ish. I started the American School program, and I got sucked in by their many drum circles. Actually, I went to a school in Minneapolis, and like now just the sound of drum circles makes me feel like I need an Ambien. Yeah. It's been, and part of why I was following your work for many reasons was because I've always been interested academically and practically in the questions of what empowers or inhibits women from recognizing their own gifts in leadership and in ministry. And this is an area in which you have poured so much love and attention. So I thought maybe we could start there, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. That'd be glorious.
When you first noticed that you had a spark or a gift that lent itself to that kind of service, and whether or not you felt like you could pursue that.
What, in terms of pursuing leadership myself?
Yeah.
I often say, and I it's not even a tagline, I think it's a fact. I often think I was the last to know of my community that I was a leader. But when I look back, I feel a bit like that bit when you watch the end of The Usual Suspects, where all the indicators are all around you, and it's like, how did you not know? I feel a bit like that. And I would say that my teachers at school were great. Terrible school, but the teachers were great. And like, I was the captain of sports teams, and if there was some class president-esque thing, it was me. And I grew up in, well, I went to a local Methodist church, and they, things there. And I would always have that, okay, I'll bring it here, I'll get it done type role. But the idea of that being visible to many people, I found, I mean, it was a weird contradiction, because I liked doing those things, but I didn't really want to be seen doing those things. I think the ongoing conflict was, I love doing this, but who me? And who do I think I am? And what gives me the right? And am I allowed to do this anyway? Because my youth pastors at the time, really dynamic couple, and she was probably the more visible leader, but she was very, very outspoken against women in leadership, which is always one of those great ironies. I'm like, hey, you know, I can see you, right?
She's leading Elizabeth Elliot style in not leading. I mean,
yeah, pretty much. Pretty much as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think those were the beginnings, and probably in my college years was when I think I can think of a time when a few people just sat me down. Do you know what I mean? They said, okay, we've tried to be subtle about this. You know what I mean? Try to be nice about this, but you really need to do something. So yeah.
It's amazing, the role of community in identifying gifts. And also, I mean, even just, of course, obviously, anyone watching you, your natural charisms. Like, I see you and I immediately want to give you my authority. So, like, you obviously have like a magnet
that is terrifying.
that draws people in. I wonder if what kind of, as you started to sort of gather the skills and the networks and the tools it would take to pursue leadership, spiritual leadership in particular, what kind of, I know also that you are somebody who is not siloed. You have wide networks, and because of that, I know you have tremendous compassion for people who are kind of on both sides of this of the kind of women in ministry question. But how then do you see, like, what the structural, what are some of your opinions about the structural impediments to like, what prevents women like you from being able to enter like a ministerial leadership position with confidence?
I mean, rank misogyny goes a long way in prayer. Rank misogyny will really slap a few people down. It's funny, I do a lot of coaching, and I was talking with a number of women leaders just yesterday, and a number of them would share the same story, that there was a point in their leadership journey. They may have been worship leaders, they may have been youth pastors, they may have been campus pastors, and they were told that, you know, we're going in a different direction, and they were going to be replaced by a younger person and a male person. And it was like they could go so far, and at some point the wall would cut and the ceiling would come and find you.
Yes.
And so I think there have been two things. Some, I mean, you know, I'm aware that there's a whole theological continuum. Go with God. But I think do you know what I mean? I'm not going to argue with somebody about that, because that's their thing. But I would say, even in the spaces which do say that we welcome and we celebrate women's gifts, or to whatever degree they do, I think some of the greatest impediments is a lack of investment in that. It's easy to talk a good game, but all the structures actually be geared towards men, and not acknowledge the distinctives of where actually leadership development happens, where training happens, when you have archetypes of rules about how men and women interact, whether a woman can be in the same room as a guy, and saying, you know, we've got to have these rules for decency and all these kinds of things, but no alternative solution. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, we're not going to do that. I'm like, okay, that's great, but what are you going to do? And it's like, oh yeah, we didn't think of that. We didn't think of that bit. And those have been some of the biggest, and where I've seen the greatest wounding, because it's such a mixed message of, you've got these gifts, you've got this call, you've got this. Oh well, you've got this kind of thing. I think that's right, again and again, where I've seen it for women.
It reminds me too of the history of early Pentecostalism versus, you know, evangelicalism. While evangelicalism was busy having sort of full culture wars around women in ministry, you know, so many denominations inside Pentecostalism, Black, white, and Hispanic, had had opened the doors for women in, as you know, usually because it had something like a female a founder, like an Amy Semple McPherson,
Yeah.
for instance. But then by the time they formalized budgets and mission boards, and then by the 40s, it was predominantly a male enterprise. I think even the Foursquare denomination, right, which was founded by one of the most powerful Pentecostal women of the 20th century, Amy Semple McPherson, were something like 70 to 75% male clergy by the second half of the 20th century. It's just amazing how just these like small incremental structures just nudge women away from that feeling of being acceptable, and then having money behind them.
I mean, money has a lot of power, doesn't it? And it's funny you say about Foursquare, because I remember talking with some of my friends in Foursquare a few years ago and them saying, this doesn't make sense. Do you know what I mean? It's not right. When we think of our founding, how we have kind of lost our way. But I think where the money goes shapes so much. And I think there are so many visible and invisible obstacles for women in terms of them embracing their gift, in terms of how we do education, in terms of access to money, in terms of I don't know about you, Kate, what you saw growing up, who you saw growing up, about what was possible. Do you mean what was possible for you as a woman with a brain the size of the solar system, wanting to work out what to do with it? Do you know what I mean? And there wasn't much said. And there wasn't much, and even where there wasn't much said, nor was there an encouragement to innovate and create. And I had in terms of the visibility, that does something, because you think, oh well, maybe it's just me then thinking this thing. I had these posts on Instagram and in the past few months just listing women in the Bible, and I had people both in the feed and in my DM say, does that woman really exist? Because they'd never heard of her. They'd never heard of Huldah. No one had taught about it. No one had taught about what she'd done or her influence or anything like that. And someone mentioned Shira to me about her building 3 cities. And I'm like, where was she? But their stories. So you have this you have both the lack of resourcing and access to resourcing, the lack of a kind of sometimes an encouragement or a passive encouragement, whatever's happening in the culture around you, but also not seeing visible, accessible examples that you can not necessarily completely imitate, but just kind of a nod
have a scriptural imagination for, a historical imagination. And I wonder too, some of the opening up to a visibility for women in ministry. I'm just thinking of some of so I wrote the spiritual marketplace too is a bit of a mixed bag, isn't it? Because it also tells women that like not only, they can't just be deeply spiritually wise, but they have to have kids in matching chambray Christmas outfits. And there's I think the rise of what I think of as like an Instagram theology has also been really deeply punitive for women in particular.
Shall we go there? Because I don't even know where to begin. Where to begin? Whether you can be overweight.
Yes, that's right.
Can you be overweight?
Yeah.
Can you not have children and not want them?
Yes, that's right.
Can you be single?
Yes.
And your gifts be celebrated and not tolerated, and not just be an accelerated burnout program for you?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you be older than, I'm 47, but most people don't know my age. But can you be, I tell them, but whatever. But what happens when you're 50?
Yes, that's right.
Do you know what I mean? Are we doing the ageist thing here on? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Can we just call it that? Can we just call it ageism? And in terms of in these things, do you have the financial resources to have the team that will help you build your Instagram following?
Yes, that's right.
And will we tell everybody that we have teams that help build our Instagram?
No, we just have a song in our heart, Joe, and that song apparently is really good at Canva. So
I'm terrible at Canva. Let me tell everybody. I have a friend who does all of this because I'm terrible. And also, what burden is that placing on us?
Yes.
What burden is it placing on women to feel that for you to enter into your calling, and I know that life goes fast, so I know that sometimes these things get lost in the conversation, or in people getting on with stuff. So I'm not saying we're not all deliberately hiding something. We just don't always have the time to say.
Yeah.
But the burden it can place on someone saying the reason why I haven't got that book deal or this thing is because I haven't crafted and curated.
What terrible words.
I
Curated
mean,
used to be used for art museums, not
I know.
for women's profile
I
pictures.
don't feel worthy of the word curate. I hear myself saying and think, Joe, who are you?
No,
And why are you saying that?
it is a visual perfectibility project, which is overwhelmingly gendered, and it becomes this very strange key to the lock of allowing women to have the ability to publish books or
Totally.
to.
And we all take pictures bending over so no one can see our stomachs. I have fat rolls. I have never had a 6-pack. I barely have a 1-pack. Do you know what I mean? There's just a gesture down there and a rumor that there were abs there before children. I mean, that's all we've got, friends. That's all we've got.
I like that the more delicious the comment, the louder your voice gets. You're like, look, I have this. Oh, it makes me so happy.
And soon the dogs in the neighborhood will circle because of the dog whistle in my voice. You know what I mean? Just saying, Joe, what's going on? Oh, you're feeling irate about women in leadership again.
It does, and I have to say, I have found that I spend a lot of time being sick. I spend a lot of time around very sick people. We are living through a global plague, which has preyed upon the weak, and it is a strange time, I think, to be requiring women to be promoting themselves with the kind of the women in leadership model, with that kind of perfectibility project, especially now, especially when our inversion, our celebration that the weak are the people that God draws close to, is the thing that we should be so good at seeing clearly right now, when like brokenness is undeniable for a second, like just for a hot minute.
Yeah. It's a painful thing to be caught in if you feel you have to look good at a time when everything is so devastating. And also, where's spiritual depth in that? I mean, can we just I mean, and when I think of all of us on here, when we think of the things that have seared our souls, that have been with us through miscarriages and devastating diagnoses and the end of marriages and life choices that were chosen on our behalf, it wasn't what filter we had that helped. And again, no shade to the creatives, because the creatives do this out of a beautiful expression of their creativity. But I think we might be trading the thought leadership, the story. Do you know what I mean? The story of God's faithfulness, the contribution we can make. I mean, we've only got a finite amount of energy. What do we got? Because we can't afford to spend it all on all of this. We need to be coming up with solutions to the many, many problems in the world right now that are very evident.
I think one of my funniest little photos ever, I remember I was trying to tell I was trying to do one of those posts where you're like very thankful to all the people who like helped me, like my family, when I was really sick, and it was this photo of me in the hospital, and I was really I was like this, like in my hospital gown, and then my friend took a picture of me, no word of a lie, 10 seconds later, and I was just like entirely passed out. And I thought, like, isn't that it? Like, isn't it so, most of what we need to foster that deep call inside of us is not going to be available to be seen from the outside in. And it certainly does make us, I think, sometimes spiritually confused about whether whether the world needs our gifts. And
and it would be, sorry, go on.
No, I just think you've done such a good job of like always trying to pull that out of people, where we're trying to, invert the story of what beauty and power looks like.
Well, and powers are huge, and whether we use beauty as power, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? And whether that's become the only power you have, the only contribute. If the only power you have and the only contribution you have to make is through your beauty, your physical, and whether by the grace of God and the fluke of the day, your beauty fits whatever cultural aesthetic you're living in at that time in history, in that country, in that part of the world. Do you know what I mean? If that's all there is,
that's right.
that leaves us that leaves us real hollow, and it's a real shame. But we've been hearing these messages since we were kids. Do you know what I mean? In terms of what made us enough or too much or not good or better. And if, as sometimes the illustration is the kingdom of God is an upside down thing, then hopefully we can not be defined by those things and actually see the gifts that make the difference.
Yes, that's right.
And actually value what God has placed in, maybe even see what God has placed inside of us, and see what God has placed inside of others, rather than think of all the reasons why we are not fit to make a contribution in society.
Yes.
Yes.
So then I'm just thinking, maybe we just, as we kind of close this out, then let's just bless some of those things. Like, blessed are the people who don't yet see the many gifts that everybody else sees.
Yeah. Yeah. And blessed are the people who are working it out. And it's and who are working it out in their everyday lives, in everyday ways. And blessed is the woman who had a dream at 65.
Yes, that's so good.
You know what I mean? And blessed is the woman who is single and who is divorced, or who is yes, maybe has 2.4 kids and 3 dogs or whatever, but is bored.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm just making it right now. I'm just making it. And blessed because you have a God that blesses you.
Yeah. Yes.
And already celebrates you, doesn't tolerate you. Blessed are you because you have a God who sees you.
Yes.
Like real you, all you.
Yeah. Yes. And who does not require our independence, does not require our perfection, and in fact doesn't even always require our skills, because the Holy Spirit draws close to us when we don't yet know how to answer the call. Yeah.
Yes. Blessed are you who don't have a strategic plan for your calling.
Or a 5-year or a 6-month plan.
Blessed are you whose vision board went up in flames in March 2020.
That is so good.
There are so many blessings along those lines, aren't there?
My dear, let us do this again. And
yes.
In the meantime, my love, blessed are you who encourage others. You fill other people's hearts. I know it is not always convenient or fun. And thank you for the way that you serve. You open up new, beautiful space. And even I, who didn't know you till today, can feel it. So thanks, my dear.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Meet you again sometime.
Yes, indeed.
And thank you to everyone. Blessed are all of you. Have a great day. Bye, guys.
Bye.